Hold on to your coffee, mama and papas, because today we've got an absolute rebel in the parenting space. The one and only Randy Free. This isn't your fluff and punishment expert. No, no, no. Randy is the creator of the game-changing PEACE-ful Parenting Process, a framework built for families just like ours. Shifting your view, easing the tension, attuning to those jagged emotions, really connecting and empowering, not punishing your offspring to build emotional resilience and real-world smarts. He's coached hundreds of overwhelmed, exhausted parents through that nonstop chaos because he's lived it. Randy isn't just another counselor. He's an associate psychiatric counselor for the nation's largest managed care organization, and also a dad who's walked this ADHD path himself, raising kids who are now thriving adults if you needed a little hope today. So get ready for heart, hope, real talk, and the tools that let you go from meltdown mania to meaningful connections. Let's welcome Randy to the mic. Randy, welcome to Chaos and Caffeine.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So I have provided an introduction, but I would like to leave space for you to do a self-introduction if you would like.
Okay, yeah, certainly. My wife and I have been married 38 years this month. We have three adult children, and I'm currently working as a psychiatric counselor. I have been involved with kids for probably 40 years since I was about 20 years old. And this is a new career for me. I retired in 2020. I was an international tax partner with a global accounting firm that just had a really strong passion for uh, counseling, coaching, and working with kids. And so I went back to school, got a master's in mental health counseling and sciences, and started down this path.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. So, I need to start here. I need you to tell all of our listeners why positive parenting or gentle parenting is handing over the reins, and I want you to tell them why that is not true.
Yeah, my perspective on parenting is based on my own parenting experience, and uh, I was raised by very authoritative parents. They were, kids are to be seen and not heard. Uh, they worked on behavior and following commands. But when I became a parent, they don't. I don't know if you remember coming home with your first child, right? From the hospital, you
Yes.
don't have a manual. You just get home and you're like, oh my gosh, I have this little person, to take care of. And our first child had colic. She cried a lot. There was a lot of things going on. And we were new. We thought, oh, we must be a failure because our kids are, crying all the time. And based on my personal experience and my professional experience, I began to realize that traditional parenting doesn't work, especially with ADHD and neurodivergent kids. And so I started looking for what can work. How do we help the child to develop the skills they need? Unfortunately for me, I came to realize that it's really not about the behavior. It's more about brain development and skill development that's underneath the behavior. And I think that's where traditional parenting misses the point. And gentle parenting sometimes doesn't go far enough to balance out the training and boundaries with the love and connection, if you will.
Yeah, I agree. When I tell people that I positive parent, they look at me like I've lost my mind. And I believe they assume that my 10-year-old is running the show, but that is not the case at all. We are working on expressing ourselves kinder. I love that he advocates for himself, but his delivery could definitely use some work. So we're working on that. But yeah, I run across that a lot. I'm not going to let my kid run the show. And I was
Mhm.
also raised in a very authoritative household. And it just did not work with my kid at all. So I had to retrain myself. And here I am trying to retrain the masses.
Oh, I love that. Clinically, I would see parents come back in week after week with their kids, and they would tell me nothing's changing, nothing's changing. So I started to wonder, it's like, what's not working here? And that's when I began researching ADHD. I took a certification course. I've read over 3 dozen books on the topic and really dug into it and believe that connection is the foundation. You really need to connect with your child in order to understand what's underneath the behavior.
Yeah.
Kids, I think, know what behavior we want as parents. They understand it. They're just not able to get there on their own all the time, and they need that help. So,
I agree wholeheartedly with the connection over correction movement. And I feel like that's another thing that makes people feel like positive parenting is gently redirecting, because I do redirect in public and then I correct in private. So that makes them feel like that small section of redirection that they've seen is the end of the conversation, but that's not what's happening at all.
mhm. No, I agree. And as a man myself, I run into this a lot with dads, right? Dads tend to come in hot and heavy. They want to force the issue. They start to direct and command, and the kid just shuts down. And they can't internalize logic while the child is externalizing emotion.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you. In the moment, you want to gently redirect if you can. Maybe if it's a total meltdown, all you can do is co-regulate with them and help them to regulate. And then later, it could be tomorrow or a few days later, when they're calm, you can revisit the situation, help them process what was going on, and then teach, right? Because in the moment, they're not going to internalize the logic you're trying to share.
Yeah. Can we expand on that? When you have dads come to you and they push back, how do you gently redirect, if you will?
I work on perspective, just helping them by educating them a little bit more about the difference between a neurotypical and a neurodivergent brain, that there's a larger gap between the logical and emotional sides of the brain. And it's like a bridge under construction. The bridge just simply isn't there for the child to tap into logic, to even remember the consequences from last week, to redirect their, perspectives in the moment.
Yeah.
And if dads can understand that, then they can respond with more empathy and wait and not correct in the moment, not come in with logic, but come in with connection. And also, as you were saying earlier, to help them realize that you're not giving up control doing this. You're still in authority. You're deciding what battles you pick and what things you teach, but you're being more effective. The dads think often that they're being more effective by trying to teach in every moment, and that just leads to chaos.
Yeah.
So they're actually battling themselves.
I have been in parent training for about 6 years, and I still need that reminder that, okay, right now, he's not hearing you. Just be quiet. Save this, put this in the back file for later. But I still struggle with that sometimes.
Yeah, no, it is hard. And some kids are verbally aggressive, right? They'll say really hateful, hurtful things in the moment. And as a parent, it's hard not to get hooked. But if you escalate, that gives them permission to escalate. And then the whole thing is a meltdown, and nobody's learning anything
Yeah.
at the moment. I remember a time when my son, we have 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, and the son is the middle. He had done something that made me upset, that I needed to talk to him about. So I said, Harrison, we need to talk. And he looked me right in the eyes, and without a word, he ran up the stairs, and I heard his door slam. I'm like, seriously, you just ran away from me? So I got a little hooked, and I went up the stairs, and my wife was watching. She's like, okay, what's about to go down? And I went to his door and I said, Harrison, I need you to come out. If you don't come out, I'm coming in. And he had locked his door. And so without really thinking this through, it's in the heat of the moment, right? I backed up a bit, I raised my foot, and I actually kicked his door in. And he is in the room like wide-eyed, like, what just happened? And so we were talking about this recently. He's now 27. And I asked him, said, do you remember what you were in trouble for? He's like, no. And like, I don't actually remember it either, but we both remember that dad kicked your door in, right? And that's what the kids remember from those moments. They don't remember what we were trying to teach them, but they remember that somebody lost their temper, and things got out of hand. So not my finest moment, but I use that stories with dads to let them know, yeah, I've been there. I get it. I've lost control.
When you're parenting a child with ADHD or executive function challenges, there is no simple manual. It's hard to know, am I supporting or enabling? How do I set boundaries that build independence and accountability? How do I create consequences that teach and not just punish? World-renowned ADHD specialist Cindy Goldrich is a mental health counselor and founder of PTS Coaching. Cindy and her team of expert coaches teach strategies grounded in brain science and delivered with deep compassion. They help parents move from frustration and confusion to clarity and connection. Because ADHD isn't just about attention, it impacts motivation, emotional regulation, problem solving, and it affects the whole dang family. If you're ready to stop walking on eggshells and start building calm, connected relationships, reach out to ptscoaching.com or check them out in the show notes. If you've got a complex kid and want support that actually helps, this is a great place to start. Thank you so much for sharing, because I think shame dies in community. So when we hear other parents say, I flubbed up, it makes us feel less guilty about our own flubbing up.
Yeah, no, it's a big point because I agree. A lot of parents that struggle with neurospicy kids, right? They hide. They don't feel like they can talk about it. And going back to Harrison again, not that he's our only child with ADD, but he graduated late, and we were homeschooling at the time and struggling just even with homeschooling to get him through school. And it was embarrassing for us because all of his other friends were graduating and he wasn't. And that was really hard, especially for my wife. She said, I cried. I just sat home and I cried because I felt like a failure in the moment. But at the end of the day, we realized that we were doing the right thing. It just took time for that to come out. But you're right, there is a lot of shame, a lot of guilt that keeps parents in the isolation when they really need community. So I love that you create that community for parents.
Yes, I think it's so vital. So let's rip the band-aid off. Tell me what the biggest ADHD parenting myth that you've heard about good parenting and why that fuels unnecessary lies and heartache.
And I want to make sure I understand when you say ADHD myth about good parenting. Are you talking about the parenting that you and I promote, that type of good parenting, or?
No, more so about if, like you said in the beginning, when your kid was crying all the time and you're like, man, we must be doing it wrong. I
Right,
feel like
right.
ADHD parents are often told,
Hmm.
which I do feel like we play a big part in it by
Yes.
changing how we parent. But I hate the myth that ADHD is just bad parenting.
Right. Exactly. I understand what you're saying now, and I do see that a lot with parents. They come in and they feel like, oh, my child is just being manipulative. This is intentional. It's a personal attack. And so I have to be stronger. I have to have harder boundaries. I have to be parenting all the time. And that just makes things worse.
Yeah.
The second pillar in my methodology is called ease. And it's the one that the parents give the most feedback. And what I talk with parents about is easing the tension in the home. And my tagline is that conflict invites chaos, but culling invites calm. And so what I talk with them about culling in terms of parenting is choosing your battles.
Mm.
So go through your day, look at all the stress points that you put your kids through, all the transitions, all the conflicts. How many of those can we remove from the situation to de-escalate the tension level in the home? And we talk with the parents about determining code words and things like that. And the feedback I get is, wow, that immediately helped us to bring the temperature level down. My husband and I are now able to say, is this a red quadrant or a blue or a green? It's part of the format that I use, but that through that communication, they catch each other and they can decide in the moment, do I really want to fight this battle or can we defer it? And that has a huge impact.
I love that so much, but I would like to add that after that was one of the first lessons I had to learn. I stopped taking everything so personally. They're not trying to manipulate you, they're struggling and they need help. But how do we do that? How do we begin to recognize, okay, they're not manipulating me or they're not personally attacking me? How would you go about directing people or parents?
Yeah, that's a good question. And in some cases, the kids are manipulating. Kids are smart and they learn very quickly where the limits are and how far they can push. So I, in the beginning, talk with parents to have them monitor what's going on in the home with the children and the meltdown and the moments and ask, is their child able to turn on and off this behavior?
Mm,
And if they're able to immediately turn it off, to me, that's more manipulation than it is a distress signal.
yeah.
A lot of the kids can't turn it off, and that is a distress signal. So it's a good testing point because you're right. Some kids are manipulating and others are not.
Yeah. I love that because, yes, you are right. A meltdown cannot be turned on and off. And I love that you said that sometimes kids are manipulative because I am raising a 10-year-old haggler. He is a bargainer. He is all about the reward and not what the reward is. He's about earning it or doing whatever he can to get it. And then after that, he doesn't care. So I love that you said that because I am raising that kid.
Yes. Yeah, that's fine. And I have to I want to remind parents too that ADHD kids are incredibly brilliant, right? You know it as a parent, you see it, you've seen it in certain aspects. So it's finding where they're brilliant and fostering that. And with our own kids, our parenting allowed us to homeschool. Not every parent can do that. I understand that. But when we were able to do that, we learned to teach them in a way that they could learn, meaning focusing on their passions, their skills. My oldest daughter's an interior designer, and she loves anything to do with art and creativity. But you give her math, science, history, that was a no-go. And back when she was in middle school, I think her first year of middle school, that was our biggest struggle. And we were up at night, 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, trying to finish homework, and she was still failing. We're like, what is going on? And the school at that point, it was maybe before really they had IEPs and help. They said either we have to put her in special ed or she's mainstream. There was no in between. And we knew she wasn't special ed. She just needed some extra support. So when we moved from Northern California to Southern, we took them out of school and started to homeschool them. And that was a really good blessing for us. And it turned out to work really well for the kids. And our version of homeschooling, some people think homeschool is they're isolated, they don't, go around other kids. It wasn't the case. We were always in and out of other groups and teaching situations. So they were with kids that were older and younger. They were very well socialized through that homeschool process.
Very nice. I think about that a lot. My son begs to be homeschooled, even though I really do feel like he would miss that social aspect. But that would be maybe even a better scenario if he were in a homeschool curriculum but still had that social interaction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are those groups out there. We were part of Saddleback Christian Academy, and at the time it was about 300 families that were part of this co-op. And so, for example, we had an engineer from a power plant that would come to our home and he taught algebra. And then other days, our kids would go to somebody else's home and they would learn civics or biology and things like that. So there was a good social interaction and they would go on field trips together. I think it was positive in that they learned to socialize with kids older and younger and not just the same age.
Yeah.
But I will say there was a point with my son in particular that it wasn't helpful to have his mom as his teacher.
Mm.
So at that point, we put him in Star Academy, which is an online homeschool academy, and he had an actual virtual teacher that he checked in with. So it was a little bit of a hybrid for him, but in the end, it worked out.
Good. You mentioned that ease is the second pillar of your methodology. Would you like to share the other pillars?
Sure. It's based on the acronym PEACE, P-E-A-C-E, and I chose PEACE because peace is what is missing from a lot of our families, and we're looking for peace. The first pillar is perspective. As I talked about before, I really think it's important for parents to have the perspective that outbursts are not intentional, but they're an involuntary reaction. So I start with that perspective. And I play a little game with the parents. It's like the newlywed game, but I call it the newly parenting game because I like to see how closely aligned the mom and dad are on their parenting.
Hmm.
And it's fun. And some of them come out very aligned, and some of them come out like, wow, we're really far apart.
That sounds
So
like
I
us,
love,
very far
yeah,
apart.
I love starting with the perspective just to figure, okay, where are we and what page, are each of us on? The E stands for ease, and so that's talking about de-escalating the home and the environment that the child is in. My tagline is again that conflict invites chaos and culling invites calm. So we go through how to choose the battles because if you're fighting every battle, your home is going to be chaos all the time, and nobody's going to be learning. And that's where I found the parents in my clinic coming in week after week with the same issues. Nothing was changing. So easing the tension allows us to be intentional about the battles we do choose and the learning points that we're trying to make. The third pillar is aid, and that is aiding emotional regulation. So, as I mentioned before, I believe kids can't internalize logic when they're externalizing emotion. And so we go through teaching parents how to co-regulate so that the kids eventually can self-regulate. I have a picture of a volcano and there's 5 levels. And I ask the parents to walk through from the base where the child is calm all the way up to the meltdown, walk through that with the child and ask them, give me an example of when you're kind of this level of stress and what's going on in your body. So we're trying to help the kids understand their own warning signs. And then we talk about, okay, at each level, how do you like to be soothed? Do you prefer to have a hug? Do you want distance? Do you want to throw something against the wall? What is your method of soothing so that parents can help the child recognize the warning signs and then choose what I call an off ramp so that we hopefully don't get to the meltdown. Once we're regulated, the fourth pillar is C, the connect, and that's cultivating connection. And by this, I mean really allowing the child to debrief every day, tell you how their day went, process what's going on. If there was an adverse event, let's talk about it. Let the kid tell you in their own words, and you're attuning with them. So you're using your words to say, I hear you say this was really hard. Tell me more about that. And you're listening to get underneath the distress response so that you can identify what the developmental deficits are that we want to work on. And that's where we start to focus in the fifth pillar, which is empower.
Mm.
So, based on those developmental deficits, we set goals and action points that the kids agreed to, and we start to work on those. Those are actually allowing the brain to develop new neural connections so that the executive functioning develops so that they can problem solve, they can take perspective, they can defer, rewards and things like that. And they eventually develop and can internalize the regulation and choices to respond differently than just melting down. So those are the 5 pillars. It's perspective, ease, aid, connect, and empower.
I thought the connection was going to be my favorite part, but I think it is the volcano followed by empower. Very good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's we have to start with co-regulating, but the goal is for the kids to self-regulate, right? We don't want them to be dependent on us because we're raising them to be responsible adults and they need to know how to do this, when they get out on their own. That's one thing I often talk with parents about, partly, I guess, as another perspective change to help them bring the future forward. It's like you're raising this little person to be an employee, to maybe be a husband or a wife or a friend, right? And a young adult. So how is this behavior, what's happening now, going to work out in the future?
Yeah.
And that can be an aha moment. It's like, oh, yeah, we don't want this happening when they're in a marriage or in a work situation.
As the mom of a son, I struggle with that because there is something in that mom son relationship. I don't know what it is. I didn't think that I would be that way, but I totally baby him in so many ways.
Yeah, it's our son's just gotten engaged, so he's going to be married in September. So we're very excited about that. But you're right, there is a special bond with moms and their sons for sure.
Yeah, he's 10, and I totally do things for him that he could be doing for himself. So I'm working on that.
Like I tell moms, like, you're setting that bar really high for the potential
I
spouse.
know. And as a feminist, that is counterproductive on my part over here.
Yeah, yeah, too funny.
Is your next step on the ADHD parenting journey treatment, but you're feeling a little apprehensive? You, my friend, are not alone. So many of us want options that are science backed and parent approved. Meet Dr. Richard Bowles, geneticist, ADHD dad, and creator of NeuroNeeds. When his own son was struggling, he created a powerful all natural supplement that helped his son get off stimulant meds completely and thrive all the way to college. It's called NeuroNeeds, and it's packed with exactly what ADHD brains need to function, focus, and regulate without the side effects. If you're curious, hit the link in the show notes to check it out. And don't forget to sign up for our newsletter while you're there, because right now, NeuroNeeds is doing us a solid by giving away a free brain bundle, and all you have to do to be considered is to sign up for the newsletter. Because you deserve science you can trust and support you can feel. So we talked about how ADHD is not the product of quote unquote bad parenting, but I would like for you to go in more on the power behind peaceful parenting.
Yeah, the power behind it. I really believe the heart is connection. The program that I went through at Concordia for the master's was based on attachment and attunement, and that's all part of connecting so that we deeply understand our child and what their struggles are and what they need from us. I see that as sort of the connector of all the other parts, even though it's my fourth pillar. I really do feel like that's foundational. And unfortunately, today we live in such a disconnected world. Technology steals our attention constantly. And I always look when I'm out of the restaurant, it's like how many people are talking or how many people are on their phones, right? And unfortunately, even I saw a 2-year-old or 3-year-old in the airport recently. The mom had them on their little iPad or whatever, and it was just so apparent that there was no connection going
Mm.
on. I just feel for families who are being torn apart. Parents are super busy, I get it, but the connection piece for me is just such an important aspect of raising a family.
Yeah. Up until a month ago, I was the mean mom.
Mm.
My son swore everyone in his school had access to YouTube and he was still on kids' YouTube. So I thought I would be clever and provide him with a moderated version of YouTube, thanks to Google Family Links. But it's new to him, so now his dopamine hyper focus is right there on those videos.
Mm.
So I tried to have him watch a little kid appropriate video that would explain the dangers of staying on your phone all the time. So we've agreed that he needs 3 hours of play, and that could be recess, PE, sports, but also us playing outside. So I am working on it, but I did not see that beast coming.
It's hard once you let it out to put it back in the tube, right? Like toothpaste. But
Yeah,
it is one of the biggest struggles I see with parents that come into the clinic, that the technology has just gotten out of hand. And then when you try to reel it back, there's a huge battle.
yeah,
So it is good to moderate it, allow it to be there, but within moderation. And I like that you balance it with play and exercise. You're probably aware, a lot of studies that talk about the importance of exercise to improve brain function, especially exercise that include balancing, because it strengthens the part of the brain that deals with executive functioning. So getting
mm,
them involved in sports and dance, or like martial arts, things that improve balance, can be a really good thing to have happen. At, the alternative is if they're inside all the time on their phones or the TVs, they're not exercising, they're not moving, and
yeah,
that does have an impact on them.
yeah. Hopefully, fingers crossed, it's just the new shiny object right now, and it will eventually not be so fun, and life will go back to normal.
You mentioned peer pressure. That's a huge thing,
Yeah,
and it will only continue to grow as he goes into middle school and the teen years for sure, because you're doing something different than a lot of families, and you're doing the right thing. And eventually, hopefully, he looks back and realizes this, but in the moment,
yeah.
he feels deprived, right? And like, mom's the mean mom, and won't let me have this. It's tough.
Randy, in a very short window, I became my dad. I don't, I don't know how that happened so fast.
Yeah, that's funny, isn't it? How we say we're going to be that way, and now I'm that way.
I remember very vividly, wanting to go do the things that my friends were doing, and my dad was like, "No, you're not doing that." And now I am. I'm saying the same things, almost in the exact same language.
There is wisdom there. Yeah. I have a boys group at through my church organization that I've been mentoring, uh, many of them since they were fourth graders, and this year they're high school seniors graduating. So this Thursday is our last group together, and it feels a little bittersweet, but I think at that same time they're well prepared, to send them off. But they often joke with me because when I first met them, they were fourth graders. I'm now 63 and they're 18, and they joke that I'm the old man, and my dad jokes and things like that. But it's like, you just wait,
Yeah,
around.
it happens so fast.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people, a lot of parents are under the misconception that not only is positive parenting, handing over the reins, but parents often say, well, that's just sticker charts and rewards. What do you have to say to counter that, to let parents know that that's not even but a small part of that?
Yeah, it's sticker charts and rewards. Sometimes they work, but I've seen a lot of times where they don't work unless you have realistic expectations. I had one young boy come into my clinic, and he was about 8, and I always check in with the parents first before I see the child. And the dad was giving me an update. He's like, "Yeah, things are going great. I have a to-do list with him, and when he checks them all off, checks all the tasks off, he gets a reward." And I was curious, I said, well, tell me what's on the list. And the dad shared there was like 15 things on this to-do list. And I was like, gosh, are you sure he can get through? Oh, yes, he can do it. I know he's brilliant. I'm like, sure, I know he's brilliant, but let me, see how he's doing. So I switched, and he came in, the son came in, and as soon as I asked him about this to-do list, he like threw himself on the couch. He started to cry a little bit. It's like, I can never get through it all. I can never do it. I never get to the reward. So I don't even try. And so it was so apparent that the dad and the son were not connecting. They were disconnected. And the dad had expectations that were just above what the boy was able to do at the moment. Not that he can't
Yeah,
get there, but in the moment, 15 is too many. So let's scale back. And kids will kind of learn the system. If you have the reward system, they can kind of learn to play the system, if they're able to even remember to get through all of those things. So it can backfire and demoralize the child if they're not able to remember and to keep up with the to-do list. But if it's short enough and focused on the right things, I think it can be positive. I like to have more of a sort of a positive reward system, meaning if there's behavior we don't like and we want to work on, when they show that they can, stop that and improve, then they get something back, right? So something may be going away versus always having a reward. I don't want to raise my child to think I get a reward for everything. So
Yeah.
especially things they should be doing every day anyway, as part of a participant in a household and a relationship. So it's a fine balance.
Yeah. I find that a couple of things. I find that once my son has mastered one thing and we can move on to the next task, then that kind of helps pulling back the reward on something that's expected.
Mhm.
But you said it earlier that I often find us needing to revisit what we may have worked on last week or the week before.
Mhm.
It's like I think we get one thing down pat and then we're constantly having to go back and retrain or remind.
Yes, yeah, that makes sense because as the brain is developing, their short-term memory isn't as well developed. And so for them to remember what happened last week isn't always easy for them in the moment. And so you feel like this is Groundhog Day. We keep going back over the same thing, or "Oh, I thought you had this down and now you've forgotten." It's that their brain is still developing. They're not able to retrieve that memory from their short-term memory in order to use it. Over time, they'll get there, hopefully, right? But we
Yeah.
have to remind ourselves because as parents, I would get frustrated. It's like, what? We talked about this. You learned this last week. We went through this whole thing. Don't you remember? And they're like, no. And I'm, thinking, okay, are you just not trying hard enough and all of this? But it's really brain, it comes back to brain development and working memory.
Yeah. Is there a part of your peaceful pillars that works on digging deep into the executive functioning and strengthening those, or is that more of the empower pillar?
Yeah, I would say it's the empower pillar. It starts with connection, where we're getting underneath the behavior, and I have a guide, sort of a developmental guide that I work with my parents on to give them clues of what to look for. So when they're connecting, they're allowing the kids to process and retell the story of what happened in the event. The parent can be looking for, okay, is this happening or not happening? Are they able to shift gears or take perspective or problem solve? And so in the empower pillar, we do spend a lot of time teaching perspective taking and teaching problem solving and teaching the ability to defer gratification. A lot of that with my own family happened sort of organically without us really realizing what we were doing when the kids were really young. In fact, we lived overseas. We were living in Australia. In fact, my third child, my youngest daughter, was born in Australia, and so we were there. We had no family around, and my wife didn't have her friends around. So we were
Mm.
very sort of isolated. Now she made friends and had a social network, but because it was limited, it allowed her to focus a lot on the kids. And she said, I remember going in, we had a large playroom with a big rug that her parents had given us to take with us. It had been under their dining table, but it was super cushy. And she would get on the rug on the floor with the kids, and we had a big dollhouse and figures, and we had action figures, and they would role play. And she said, we spent hours role playing how you do life, how you do relationships, and what was good, what was bad. And I really think that role play taught them the executive functioning. And so I
Yeah.
use that a lot with parents to tell them you need to connect, but it's not just verbal. You need to get on the floor and play with them, right?
Yeah.
And role play these things out because play therapy and learning through play is a big part of how kids pick up life lessons.
I agree. I agree so much. My neighbor is well into her late 80s, And she always tells me that I'm a great mom, and I couldn't figure out how she would know that because, it's not like we're neighbors, but we're not in each other's homes. But it's because she would see me outside playing with my son, and it took me so long to realize that that generation did not do that. You sent the kids outside until dark, and
Yeah.
that's what she was basing me being a good mom on. I still take the compliment. I'll still take
Sure, right? Yeah.
that.
It's great that she was observant and she noticed, like this is different and that's a good thing. And again, it goes back to families that are so busy and so disconnected.
Yeah.
And I don't know about where you live, but out here, it just seems like families get their kids over engaged. They're in, club volleyball or club soccer and, baseball
Yeah.
and swimming and all these things, right? And there's no time for the family just to be together and to connect and to teach these lessons. So I think I think
Yeah.
it's really good that you're doing that and you've made it important to intentionally set that time aside.
Yeah. That is one thing he is very good at advocating for himself about. He will say, Mom, I have not had any me time this week.
Yeah.
So he will let me know if he's overexerted.
By me time, is he asking for time with you or time on his own or what is he?
Probably just time to unwind and relax on his
uh,
own. Probably
yeah.
just, he is an extroverted
Mhm.
introvert. I believe I have that
Mhm.
correct. He would prefer to be by himself, but if friends are around, then he comes alive.
Mhm.
But once that clock is spent, he needs to go back in his shell.
I'm very much that way, so I understand him. Yeah, when I'm on with my friends, it's fun, but I reach a point where I'm exhausted. I need to
Yeah.
recharge. And this last week, I was talking with my boys group about building forts, and I found through some research that building forts is actually a universal child activity. And the
Mm,
researchers think that's universal, meaning cross-cultural, because it meets a deep need for calm and safety and the ability to isolate and recharge. And so I thought, wow, that makes a lot of sense. And I had been talking with parents about creating a calming corner or things like that where kids can go. And some of my kids that I work with have the little pop-up tents in their bedrooms they can go in or a little teepee. And I think that's important for a kid to have a place they can go to that's theirs. They can decompress, they can, de-stress or whatever, and then come back out once they've recharged. So,
yeah. That actually makes a lot of sense. When my son was much smaller, he had the pop up
hmm.
tent. But even now, he kind of has his own hibernation area where I request permission to enter.
Yeah, no, it's good to give them their space, and because kids like control too, and that little space is theirs to control, and it's nice that you respect his time when he's in there.
Yeah. So I am guilty. As you know, I am raising a haggler and a bargainer. So that started with me bribing. I want to know how parents can get their kids to cooperate without the yelling, bribery, or threatening.
That's a great question. The founder of the program at Concordia that I was trained under is John Townsend, and he wrote the book Boundaries. He's got several versions: Boundaries with Kids, Boundaries with Teens, and Boundaries for Adults. And I think having solid boundaries is a really good way to communicate with kids, especially. And it takes you out of the role of being the bad guy because you come together, you agree what the boundary is, whether it's bedtime at 8 or bedtime at 7, or so much computer time. And once you've agreed the boundary, when the situation comes up, you just say, this is the boundary, this is what we agreed, and there's no haggling. You don't let them draw you into haggling over it. And you're not the bad guy because the boundary is the boundary, and we're going to live by the boundary. That's how we do life together. So I really like using boundaries in that way so that you're not always the bad guy and don't let them pull you into the conversation, right? To negotiate. You might have to state the boundary clearly, calmly, confidently, and walk away. just leave the room because they're going to continue and they'll probably follow you, right? They're going to follow you to the next room and try to haggle with you. And it's like, nope, this is the boundary. So it, and again, kids learn patterns. So if the pattern has been, I can haggle and 50% of the time, 60%, I might actually get my way, then they're going to continue, right? Because it works
Yeah.
sometimes. So it takes some time. The first time you use boundaries, it'll be kind of harsh for them. Like, wait, what? No, we usually talk about this and I can work you down. But over time, by you holding the boundary, they'll learn the new pattern and eventually say, okay, this is how it is.
Yeah. I love that you include them in on creating the boundaries because I will be honest, I am guilty of blaming someone outside of myself, such as for homework.
Mm,
I'll say, mom didn't create this rule. This is, our
mm.
teacher's, assignment. So I need to take my power back, but also give him the input so that we can come together and I can stop blaming everyone else and he can have a say.
Yeah, and that process I think will mature as they mature, but it's part of my empower pillar when you're brainstorming is to include them in that, and you're going to help them brainstorm in the beginning, but it's like you first want to identify the gap. So you as a parent have an expectation of their behavior. They as a child had an expectation. So let's make sure that we're clear on what the gap is so we know what we're trying to solve. And then we brainstorm. How can we make this better? You wanted this, I wanted that. Didn't work out. How do we make this better? And let them brainstorm and you brainstorm. At the end of the day, again, you're not giving up power. You get to decide as a parent what the final goal will be, but it allows them some input and some control. And
Yeah.
you have to be careful that they're not just trying to further negotiate when they're brainstorming. It's like, no, that's not brainstorming, that's negotiation or badgering. Let's get back to brainstorm. And hopefully you
Yeah.
can land on something, that you both agree. That's the idea, is that they have some skin in it, you have skin in it, and you come together on the goal. And that way, again, like the boundary, when it comes up, you remember we agreed on this and this is what you agreed. Now, it may be that you have to test that and it didn't quite work the way we thought. So we got to go back to brainstorming again and rethink this and come up with a new goal, because the goal, whatever goal you land on, they need to buy into it. You need to buy into it and agree that it's a win-win, but they also need to be capable of it. So whatever we're asking, they have to be able to reasonably do on their own. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's going to set up for failure.
Agreed. I love that. So, Randy, I saved the hardest one or most challenging one for last. You have said calm is a skill, not a personality trait. And I, as a Capricorn, love that. So, how do you help parents to train that skill when they are 30 seconds from completely losing their own lid?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I saw one of your podcasts on Stop Mom Burnout, and it was talking about self-care. And self-care is so important. And again, parents feel like they're so busy. I don't have time for self-care. You don't have time not to do self-care,
Yeah.
because how we show up as parents is so important. We have mirror neurons. Kids have them, adults have them, and they're meant to protect us and keep us safe. So you look around your environment and your emotions mirror what's going on. So if the kid sees mom or dad make a upset face, they might have looked at their cell phone bill, who knows? But if the kid sees that, they mirror. It's like, oh my gosh, mom or dad are upset. I'm going to get riled up or start to protect myself, and it escalates. So helping parents put self-care as a priority, and we call them activities of emotional well-being. So you as a parent, you need to make sure you're connecting deeply with your own friends. You need to have creative hobbies, things that you enjoy, exercise, getting outside, eating well, sleeping well. All of those things widen your window of tolerance. And if your window is really wide, it's hard for you to get pushed out and become agitated, irritated, or angry. But if you're not
Yeah.
doing those things, your window is very narrow. And yes, it's going to be super easy for you to get irritated at every little thing. So self-care is such an important part of being a parent that we definitely have to
Yeah.
make time for that.
That was a very unexpected answer and probably the best one that you could have
Oh,
said because I give people, a quick roadmap for what they need to do after their kid's diagnosis, and that self-care is one of the steps. And they look at me like I've lost my mind. Like, "Oh, lady, I don't have time for a bubble bath right now." And I'm like, that and it's so much more than that. And it's usually the parents that are completely triggered hot messes that are like, I don't have time for that. And it's kind of like you don't have time not to do it, you know?
yeah, it is so
That
important.
was perfect.
And it's important for the parents to do it. It's also important for the kids to have that. And if you keep the kid too busy, it goes back to easing the tension. If there's too many stressors in their lives, their window is going to be narrow as well. And so if everybody's running around with narrow windows of frustration, yes, your home's going to be chaos. And the parents, like you said, they push back, like, I don't have time for that, or no, we need to have stronger boundaries, or harder rules, or be more present parents. But none of that works until you're grounded yourself.
Yeah.
You have to be able to show up and realize that the kids hijack our emotional system. If we're calm, they'll be calm, but if we're escalated, they're going to escalate.
Yeah. I mean, I know parents out there that are listening and they're like, I can't do that, but I want to fully be transparent. I've been working on this for 5 or 6 years and I still struggle. So it's not like, it's an overnight process. But the other night, my son was angry, probably mean mom or bad mom. And, I was still happy. And he said, I hate it that whenever I'm angry, you're always happy. I said, well, it's a practice. Mom's choosing to be happy. And I hope that that is somehow sinking down into his brain and resonating because it is a choice to stay level headed amidst the chaos. Because me, 5, 6 years ago, she could not do that. But now it is a skill that I am building upon.
Yeah, that's such an important point, that this is not a one and done. This is a lifelong journey, right? Of learning to be a good parent. I tell my parents when they come into coaching that you're not going to hear this one lesson and suddenly everything's going to be changed for you. No, this is rinse and repeat over and over and
Yeah,
over. But you have to keep choosing, just like you're saying, choosing to be happy. That is a choice, and that's a powerful choice to say,
yeah,
yeah, this is going down. It's kind of crappy out there right now, but I'm going to choose to be happy. That's
yeah.
really powerful.
And I'm happy and proud that he is able to witness
Mhm.
that. I'm happy that he has the awareness, of like, I'm so mad and she's singing and doing the dishes. Because some kids with ADHD can't pick up on those emotions so well or other people's feelings are in the moment.
Right.
So we're growing over here, Randy. We're gonna get there.
That's great. And I'm sure when that, dynamic's going on, you're not ignoring him, but you're helping him realize he has a choice too. And yes, I
Yeah,
want to hear you, son. I want to hear why you're upset, what was so bad in your day, or what's upsetting you. But that doesn't mean I have to be upset too. I can
yeah,
validate you feel that way, and I have a different perspective. And I think that's lost on a lot of people today. It seems like, no, for you to understand me, you have to agree with me. And that's
yeah.
not really true. I can get you, I can feel you, I can understand you, and have my own perspective of what's going on and choose to be happy in the moment. So, right, it's a good
Yeah.
lesson for him to see.
That is a really good reminder for me and probably everyone listening that I feel like the majority of parenting is just letting them know that you see them. So I see that you're frustrated, but also reminding myself right now, I don't have to agree with whatever is happening to see you and validate you.
Mhm.
Thank you for that reminder.
Thank you. I think it's a kind of a primary need is to be heard and understood. And I can, as you just said, I can do that with you without agreeing. I don't have to agree. I know I like to use the word nevertheless. I can say, I can see your perspective and I kind of understand how you feel. Nevertheless, I've got to figure this out for myself, or I have a different perspective. And we
Yeah.
can, agree to get along in that way. I think that's so important.
Randy, I know that we just changed a lot of listeners' minds on peaceful parenting. So, would you like to tell the listeners how they can work with you on developing that?
Yeah, they could reach out to me. I have a website. It's coach2resilience.com. It's a long website, but they can find me there, and there's a overview of my approach as well as a way to contact me. That's also my email. It's randy.free at coach2to, the word coach2resilience.com.
We'll make that easy for everyone so they can just click the link in the show notes to find you.
Awesome.
Randy, you've dropped so many gems today. I can't imagine that you would have anything more insightful, but if you would love to leave a parting message, I would love to hear it.
I would just say don't give up hope with our kids. We were in the struggle, as they were growing up and not really knowing where things were going to go or how things were going to turn out. My son, who couldn't get his butt up out of bed to get to school on time, when he went away to a trade school, he actually got an award for perfect attendance. And my wife and I were like, "Who is this kid?" So don't give up hope. Stay in the trenches, connect and love on your kids, and it'll pay off.
That was another gem that I needed right now. So thank you for that.
Cool.
Randy, this has been wonderful. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Phew. I think I need to take a deep breath because Randy just dropped some serious wisdom bombs. I don't know about you, but I'm walking away with the reminder that ADHD parenting isn't about fixing our kids. It's about connecting with them, empowering them, and giving ourselves a little grace in the process. If today's conversation lit a fire under your behind, go check out Randy at Coach to Resilience. Seriously, bookmark it, tattoo it on your brain, whatever it takes, because his peaceful parenting process is the kind of real world, been there, done that support that actually makes a difference. And hey, if this episode made you feel a little less alone in the madness, please do me a favor and share it with another ADHD parent in the trenches who needs to hear it. Because the more we lift each other up, the less heavy this parenting thing feels. Until next time, remember, you're not parenting wrong, you're parenting differently, and around here, different is exactly what works.